Hi everyone, and thanks again for watching and listening to my next screencast, again about accessibility this week. As I did last week, I'd like to start with a quote from the UDL guidelines. The one that sort of struck me as I was reading over this was what you see highlighted there, that they say learning is impossible if information is imperceptible to the learner and difficult when information is presented in formats that require extraordinary effort or assistance. The reason that struck me is the fact that we spend a lot of time talking about content and information, but maybe in the context of learning the topic itself, and maybe not how we get there. And I just thought that it was an important lesson because we may not always think about how we take that path in terms of the learning, and are we providing kids the path of least resistance in terms of getting to that goal of understanding the new information. So the first file that I'd like to talk about with you tonight is a quiz that I just created a couple weeks ago, and this quiz covers quadratic properties as well as some factoring. And before studying this topic more in depth in this unit and this module this week, I thought that it looked pretty accessible until I dug deeper into the handbook and the guidelines, realizing that I could tweak a few things and maybe didn't consider all audiences when I made the document. So here you have the original, and in general I like to have more of a minimalist feel to both my classroom and the documents that I create. So I think that does help, as Rice mentioned, with students that have an attention deficit. There was a quote from the text where they say, students with attention problems, it's not that they pay attention to nothing, but rather that they pay attention to everything. So again, the reason I sort of choose that minimalist attitude is that, if there's less extraneous material, then there's less things for those students to focus on, and they can focus more on what's important. So here's just a general overview of my first question, and I have that sort of flow where I give you the original function, I ask you a bunch of stuff about it, and then it ends with a graph. I have a similar question on the second page, but instead of a graph, I ask a couple different questions at the end here about minimum and maximum, as well as domain and range. The last part of the quiz is about factoring, so taking quadratic equations, breaking them down into their components. And the last part is, again, with factoring, maybe using a couple of different techniques. And the very final question is working backwards, basically giving the students the answers, saying, here are where you would have your solutions. Could you take your solutions and write me an original function? Okay, so here's, how it looked to begin with. And then let me switch over to the document I created, which I modified based on the recommendations in the handbook. So right away you can see that you have some different coloring, some different formatting. I also will show you the alt text that I added to my graph as well. But there's your overall view. Okay, and so taking this down piece by piece, you can see here that the handbook recommended using these word headings. Okay, so starting off with that heading 1 style, heading 2, and heading 3 I used as sort of the demarcations for my different questions, so they could jump out easily. Let me scroll back and see if I can pull up my alt text for you. Okay, so in our lesson overview, we were asked to watch that video about the screen reader, and I've actually never done that, so I thought it was pretty interesting to watch the progression of the cursor and then seeing, well, hearing, comparing what I'm hearing to what I'm seeing with how the cursor is moving. And I'm assuming you must get a knack for that after doing that for a while, because to be honest, I was pretty confused trying to follow along with where the cursor was going and what was being said, and on top of that, the intonation of the artificial voice I thought was kind of hard to follow a little bit. They don't maybe pause as much as you would think, like in conversation. So again, maybe for more practice that might get easier, but to me that was pretty challenging. So here was my graph, just the blank graph that I wanted students to place their solution on once they graph the function. So I just described it as a blank coordinate plane. I noted where the axes were and how I had them marcated. I described the size of the graph in terms of how long the x and y axes were, obviously, so they would know what kind of frame of reference to be drawing the picture in. So maybe it might help to give you a side-by-side view . So there you can compare sort of all at once how my original changes from to the modified one. So again, the most notable thing would be the headings. Obviously you can't see it unless I went back and showed you that alt text, but I did also slightly modify this outline structure using the numbering format from Word. These I had created on my own just using tabs and stuff, but this I actually used the numbering built into Word. Oh, the other thing I almost forgot to mention was that I do use the Microsoft Equation Editor. I use it so much that I have it built into my quick toolbar here, but apparently you should not use that for accessibility purposes. They recommended using a program called MathType or LibreOffice. That I've actually never heard of those, but apparently they work better in the context of accessibility. So let's see if I can pull that up for you here. So there's their website. So unfortunately there is a cost involved there, but maybe if it was in the context of academia, you could either get that group discount, or maybe whatever school you're working for would pay for that. The one feature I noted was it offers this handwritten math, so that might save some time not having to necessarily type everything in. So I thought that was a handy feature. The other thing I wanted to mention was number 1 in part C, where I sort of remind kids that when you're giving me your vertex, I want it as an XY coordinate, writing it specifically like that to sort of scaffold that knowledge of, okay, if I want a coordinate, you should be writing it as, an ordered pair in parentheses. So just that sort of reminder of prior knowledge. Okay, so that was more or less all I wanted to talk about for this document. I'll be posting shortly my next screencast where I'll be talking about a PDF that I took from a smartboard. Alright, so thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the discussion boards.